is ended, and the living hostages have returned. Our people take a breath, and the tightness in our hearts has eased. But this is still an age of trauma, uncertainty, and existential risk, and we cannot afford to lose any urgency. I don't come here tonight with easy answers, but as someone who has spent sleepless nights wrestling with the most difficult questions the Jews have faced since the Shoah. There are many times when some schmuckers had to stand up and say what many might think but are constrained to say, and I've often been that schmuck. But as I look around the room tonight, I become more hopeful that I might not be the only schmuck anymore. I've always maintained my conviction that Israel must remain both the nation state of the Jewish people and a vibrant beacon of democracy. But this year has brought me to tears more times than I care to admit. I've shared in the ongoing trauma of everyone in Israel and the Jewish world since October the 7th. My faith in humanity has been shaken to the core by the footage that I've been privy to of the pure evil carried out by Hamas, and will remain so forever, because what has been seen cannot be unseen. I have felt inadequate when people ask me why their friends are silent about dead Jews, and I have no comforting answer to give. I've been anguished by the destruction and devastation in Gaza, and yes, the number of civilian deaths. I've been sickened by the outrages of extremist settlers in the West Bank. And I felt bemused when people I respect deny the complexity of moral life or refuse to see truth because it discomforts their preferred narrative. There's urgent rebuilding to be done for civilians, Israelis and Palestinians, who have endured terror and devastation, for the families of the fallen, for the fraying trust between Israel and many of its long-standing friends. I do not know about you, but I am tired. But fatigue is a privilege, and courage is a choice. We can carry on shuffling to the edge of a cliff in silence, or we can speak plainly, act bravely, and demand a better path for our people. Now is the time. Now, not when the next crisis hits, not later, not contingent upon waiting to see what happens, but now. In this moment, there can no longer be private concerns. They are a public responsibility. I've spent a lifetime in two disciplines that reward clarity over comfort, building global enterprises where numbers do not lie, and serving a Jewish public where values cannot be outsourced. I've learned that when the ground shifts beneath your feet, you don't recite old lines, you recalibrate and you act. But before we set out on the journey we must travel, we must acknowledge the darkness descending upon us. Now, cliched the term might be, but I've always hugged and wrestled with Israel. I've never resented the contradictions in my emotional and ethnic connection to the nation state of the Jewish people, because I never expected perfection from it. Sometimes Israel has scaled the peaks of excellence. Other times it has struggled, like every democracy, to find the right path, complicated in Israel's case by its unique existential vulnerabilities. I can live with that struggle and accept that the real world necessitates moral compromises, but I cannot and will not accept deliberate malevolent intent. Because when we see assaults upon Israel's democratic fabric, when we see the authorities encourage and permit extremist outrages in the West Bank, when we see a government that chooses to promote racists and bigots in their country and in ours, these are not the difficult moral choices. These are not the difficult moral choices that have protected Israel and the Jewish people. These are willful and deliberate immoral choices that endanger Israel and the Jewish people. And we have a duty to say so. So I want to address 4 crises that converge to threaten Israel's future and the future of the Jewish people. First of all, the extinguishing of any hope of a peaceful settlement with the Palestinians. Second, an assault on democratic institutions that undermines Israel's founding values. Third, a failure of societal fairness that fractures the social contract and weakens social cohesion. And fourth, Israel's increasing isolation from the community of nations. First, we have a fragile ceasefire, not a peace. The war achieved military objectives but offered no new political horizon. It is striking in just a few days, Donald Trump and Jared Kushner spoke more about peace than any Israeli minister has in years. But now we need to seize the opportunities to put wide-ranging, secure peace back on the agenda. The notion that this toxic conflict could be managed was false. Hamas is degraded, but it must be defeated. But Hamas's ideology is not an airstrip you can crater. It regenerates in prisons, in schools, and on screens, and in the political void we leave behind. Without a political horizon and a plan for post-conflict governance that is neither Hamas nor chaos, we risk tactical wins, but strategic stagnation. Defeating Hamas requires an alternative, even if imperfect, that Palestinians, the region, and the international community can support. That means Israel must couple deterrence with a credible regional political strategy. It needs both. Security and peace are interconnected, not mutually exclusive. But throughout the Gaza campaign, extremists within Israel's government, pushed an agenda of reoccupation and boasted of plans to put a final nail in the coffin of a two-state solution and the hope of a secure peace for all Israelis living between the river and the sea. The Torah teaches us, tzedek, tzedek tidof, justice, justice you shall pursue, not vengeance, not the illusions of total victory, but justice. Now this is not just a Jewish imperative, but a bedrock of Israel's legitimacy. And I hope with all my heart that the Trump plan renews the impotence for peace and sidelines all extremists. In 1947, it was the Jews who accepted the concept of two states for two peoples contained in the UN Resolution 181. While today we have legitimate concerns about a credible path forward, the threats to Israel's security, the bitter memory of violent rejections of previous efforts, Israel's legitimacy derives from the two-state concept of that same UN resolution, rejecting any concept of Palestinian statehood at any point threatens Israel's legitimacy. We therefore need steps that make two states more likely, not steps that make it impossible. If, however, the maximalist agenda of annexation takes hold, then Israel's status as a Jewish democratic state will be finished, and that would be a calamity. Secondly, the assault upon liberal democratic foundations of Israel. Israel's lack of a constitution created a vulnerability, which is offset by the liberal democratic values of the Declaration of Independence, by an independent judiciary, and a non-politicized defense and security establishment. The judicial coup started in January 2023 and continues now. It seeks to remove the democratic guardrails. Why? Why did they start the judicial coup? So that an unprincipled extremist minority can gaslight an entire nation into its maximalist agenda. That is why. Third, societal fairness. Societies that don't deliver fairness to all their citizens are weaker, and Israel cannot afford to be weak. Coalition deals that entrench unequal civic rights and responsibilities dissolve trust. When access to quality healthcare, education, and jobs vary depending on where you live, unfairness of opportunity is entrenched. When lawlessness ravages the homes and towns of Arab Palestinian communities, 20% of Israel's citizens, and the state is impotent or unwilling to protect them, it's a failure for the whole of society. And fourth, we confront the worsening reality of Israel's isolation. The end of the fighting will ameliorate it somewhat, but the long-term prospects as the devastation in Gaza becomes clearer are not good. And those who wish to divide Israel from its allies are being aided and abetted by extremists who pollute this government. The seeds of isolation were planted years ago by enemies of Israel and the Jewish people, but they're now sprouting uncontrollably. Antipathy to the Israeli government's direction of travel is now mainstream. And the numbers tell a very stark story. They keep me awake at night. They keep me awake at night because of what they mean for the future of the Jewish people. I go to sleep with fear as my companion and awake with panic by my side. US favorability towards Israel has fallen to 57%, the lowest in 2 decades. Amongst young adults, it's catastrophic, from 64% favorable in 2023 to 38% favorable in early 2024. Support for Israel has declined in the UK and in core European countries. In the United Kingdom, sympathy for Palestinians is 2.5 times more than sympathy for Israelis. In Europe, net favorability ratings have plummeted, minus 48% in France, minus 55% in Spain, minus 52% in Italy. Yet support for the two-state solution remains well above 50% across the Western democracies, including the United States. An August 2025 poll shows 58% of Americans support UN recognition in Palestine. The political divide is interesting, however. 78% Democrats, not unsurprising, and 41% Republicans. But this is stark. In 2024, only 26% of Republicans were in favor of Palestinian statehood versus 41% today. It's no surprise to see the cascade of international recognition of Palestinian statehood. Spain, Ireland, Norway, Slovenia, more recently and more significantly, the United Kingdom, Israel's historic ally, France, Australia, Canada. These are not just symbolic gestures. They are strategic realignments. They impact export licensing, legal exposure, corporate risk assessments. Cultural, academic, sporting boycotts are multiplying openly and by stealth, and just look at the treatment of Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters. But now they're being surpassed by financial and technical distancing. Politicians see the zeitgeist amongst their electorates. Sanctions become an easy option. But if there were sanctions, that would be tragic for both Israelis and Palestinians. Isolation is also not just an Israeli challenge, but a challenge for world Jewry. It makes Jews vulnerable within their countries. Recent JPR polling of British Jews reveals that 74% now describe Israel's situation as bad or very bad. In the United States, 1/3 of liberal Jews now believe US support for Israel's government is excessive. Meanwhile, anti-Semitic incidents have reached record levels, bringing murder to Jewish communities in Colorado, in Washington, D.C., and now in Manchester. 9,000 anti-Semitic incidents reported in the United States in 2024 alone, most linked to anti-Israel protests. In the United Kingdom, the incidents nearly doubled in the first half of 2024. In Germany, they almost doubled for the year. 83% of Jewish students have experienced or witnessed anti-Semitism on their campuses since October the 7th. Our young people face an incredibly hostile environment. If they do not see their own values reflected by our leaders, many may opt out altogether from the Zionist and Jewish enterprise that has sustained us through the millennia, and then we are all done. Now is the time. This anti-Semitic tsunami must be pushed back, but so too must the current assault on our values by the government of Israel, because that too will be fatal to the Jewish future. But who are we? Are we just a minority of fringe outliers standing up against extreme trends from all directions but without the numbers to make a difference? No, no, no. We are not a minority. We are a majority. We are the majority. The data from Milad tells us that our community in the United Kingdom is deeply connected to Israel. But according to JPR polls, 80% view Prime Minister Netanyahu unfavorably. But we are mostly silent. And it's our silence that is making us endangered. We are not marginal, and it's time we stopped allowing ourselves, as you heard in the video, to be hoodwinked into believing that we are. We have agency, and it's time to use it. We built the London Initiative not to hold another conference, not to issue another statement, but to catalyze unprecedented partnership between like-minded Israelis, world Jewry, and democratic allies, between people who share the London Initiative's commitment to what we call the triangle. The three interconnected propositions: mature liberal democracy, societal fairness, and secure peace. This triangle is not a luxury for better times, it is our operating system. But the partnership requires partners willing to move beyond private hand-wringing to public leadership. So I want to make four urgent calls to action. Firstly, end the institutional silence. Every major Jewish organization should publicly articulate its commitments to the values of Israel's Declaration of Independence. And this is not a criticism of Israel, it's an affirmation of Zionism. And I say to our communal leaders, to the presidents of federations, to the chairs of boards, to the chief executives of legacy organizations, and I say this with an urgency the moment demands, your silence is not neutrality, it is complicity. You were not appointed or elected to manage decline, but to lead. When 51% of British Jews say Israel's conduct clashes with their Jewish values, and younger American Jews are questioning their relationship with Israel, this is not a PR problem. This is a values crisis. And a values crisis calls for moral leadership. Oppose the annexation unequivocally. President Trump said in September, I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. I will not allow it. It's not going to happen. Yet for the extremists who prop up Netanyahu's government, annexation of the West Bank is their goal. Everything they have done, still do, plan to do, the judicial coup, settlement expansion, curtailment of funds to the PA, stoking of settler violence, is to create a set of facts on the ground that make annexation inevitable. And annexation is not a pro-Israel policy. It's an anti-Zionist policy. It would endanger the Jewish state. It's an anti-Zionist policy. And we should not outsource our opposition to it to Donald Trump. Jewish leaders in the diaspora and in Israel have to harness the will of the Jewish people against it clearly, loudly, and emphatically. And to invest in mature liberal democracy, societal fairness, and secure peace, and recognize that they cannot be isolated from each other. Support multilateral diplomacy. Fund Israeli organizations defending democratic institutions. Support initiatives expanding civic equality. Back those keeping the peace arise and alive. Israelis are fighting for democracy, for fairness and peace, and they're asking for our support. Let's support them. And finally, speak to your communities with honesty and courage. Our communities need leadership that acknowledges complexity, that validates their concerns, that enables them to love Israel and critique its government simultaneously. I speak not as a skull, but as a penitent. I grew up in South Africa, and I regret that I did not engage against apartheid, not because I was threatened, but because I felt I had no agency, and that was my failure. But when it comes to Israel, we have agency. We're not powerless, and we're not without influence. But with agency comes responsibility to speak when speaking is so hard, to act when action is costly, to lead when leadership is lonely. So we stand at a crossroads. Down one path, continued institutional silence, drift, communal division, growing isolation, and the slow suffocation of the Israel-diaspora relationship. Down the other lies the hard work of partnership, honest conversation, moral courage, strategic action, and the renewal of Zionism for the new generation. The promise of this moment is not that the world suddenly becomes simple, because it will not. The promise of this moment is that we can breathe long enough together to produce a Tikiyah Gedolah, one long sustaining note that carries across divisions and through fear. The future of Israel, world Jewry, the Jewish people hang in the balance. And the balance tips with our choices, our voices, and our courage. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and let us strengthen one another. But now is the time.